The pen was in my hand, ready to sign away my $72 million family estate. Then, I heard it. My future son-in-law, Brandon, was whispering in the hallway. He said, "Once the papers are signed, I have a way out. It is just a contract." My heart sank, but my mind grew sharp. I did not yell. I simply walked back to the mahogany desk, picked up those legal papers, and slowly tore them into pieces. Brandon walked back in, smiling, until he saw the shredded paper on the floor. His face turned a ghostly shade of white. The silence in that room was heavy. The fortune he was already counting on had vanished. Before I share the shocking lesson Brandon learned that day, please take a moment to comment below and tell me which beautiful American city or state you are joining us from today. Note, while this story is a fictional illustration created for clarity, the spiritual message and the life lessons it provides are very real and carry great value for every one of us. You know, when you reach my age, you start to look at things a bit differently. You stop looking at the road ahead, and you start looking at the trail you have left behind. My name is Arthur. For over 40 years, I worked my fingers to the bone building a business from the ground up. I remember the late nights. I remember the sacrifices. I remember the times when Martha and I wondered if we would even make it through the month. But we did make it. We lived the American dream. And as the years rolled by, my focus shifted from making money to building a legacy. I wanted to make sure that my only daughter, Sarah, would never have to worry the way we did. I wanted her to have a foundation, a sense of security, a life filled with peace. That brings me to the estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. It is a magnificent property. It sits on acres of rolling green hills, surrounded by ancient oak trees. To the world, it was a mansion worth $72 million. But to me, it was so much more than a price tag. It was the physical proof of 40 years of labor. It was a fortress of protection for my child. I remember the morning Martha and I walked through the grand hallway of that house. Martha had tears in her eyes. She kept running her hand over the marble countertops and looking out the tall windows at the gardens. She told me, "Arthur, our little girl is going to start her life here. She is going to be safe here." Martha was so happy. She spent weeks helping Sarah plan the wedding. Our home was filled with the smell of fresh flowers and the sound of laughter. Sarah was glowing, truly glowing. She looked at the photos of the Greenwich estate and saw a dream coming true. She was marrying Brandon, a young man who seemed to have it all together. As a father, seeing my daughter that happy was the greatest reward I could ever ask for. I decided that the best wedding gift I could ever give her was that house. I wanted to hand her the keys and tell her that it was hers, completely and forever. I wanted to sign over the deed so she would always have a place to call home, no matter what happened in this crazy world. Everything was set. The legal documents were drafted by my lawyer. The $72 million gift was ready to be finalized. In my mind, I was doing the right thing. I was being a good father. I was providing a legacy. I thought I knew exactly what I was doing, but I had no idea that a single conversation was about to change everything I believed about giving, about family, and about the true meaning of a promise. The morning of the signing felt like a victory lap. I remember waking up early and looking out at the sunrise over the Atlantic. Martha was already up, humming a soft tune, while she straightened my tie. She was wearing her favorite silk dress, the pale blue one she only wore for special occasions. We were heading to the city to meet our longtime lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling has handled my family's affairs for over 30 years. His office is located in a beautiful, historic building, with high ceilings and the comforting scent of old leather books and expensive mahogany wood. It is the kind of place where important decisions are made. It is the kind of place where a man's word is supposed to mean something. Sarah and Brandon met us there. My daughter was radiant, her eyes shining with the excitement of a new beginning. Brandon was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit like the successful, dependable young man I thought he was. We sat down in the heavy leather chairs, and Mr. Sterling placed the thick stack of papers on the desk. The deed to the $72 million Greenwich estate was right there on top. All it needed was my signature. I picked up my fountain pen, the one Martha gave me when I retired. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like the weight of 40 years of hard work. Just as I was about to touch the nib to the paper, Brandon's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at the screen, apologized, and stepped out into the hallway to take what he called an urgent business call. I waited, smiling at Sarah, thinking about how lucky she was. After a minute, I realized I had left my reading glasses in my coat pocket near the door. I stood up and walked toward the hallway. That is when I heard it. Brandon was standing just around the corner, his voice low, but sharp. He thought he was alone, he said. And I will never forget these words, he said. Don't worry. The old man is signing the papers right now. $72 million in equity. Just like that. Once the deed is in Sarah's name, I have a way out. If things don't work out in a few years, I am entitled to half. It is just a contract, a business deal. I am setting myself up for life. I stood there, frozen. The hallway felt like it was spinning. My heart, which had been so full of pride just moments ago, felt like it had been pierced by an icicle. Brandon wasn't talking about a marriage. He wasn't talking about a life with my daughter. He was talking about a transaction. He was talking about an exit strategy. I walked back into the office, my legs feeling like lead. I looked at the papers again. I looked at Sarah, who was blissfully unaware of the predator she was about to marry. I realized that to Brandon. The I do at the altar was no different than a signature on a car lease. It was conditional. It was temporary. It was a contract. I put the pen down. My hands were shaking, but my heart was firm. I looked at Mr. Sterling and said, I am not signing these today. The confusion on their faces was immediate, but the clarity in my soul was even stronger. I had just discovered that the man I was about to entrust with my daughter's future saw our family as nothing more than a ledger of profit and loss. We drove home in silence. Martha knew something was wrong, but she didn't ask until we were back in the quiet of our own living room. When I told her what I heard, she sat down and cried. Not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my chair and stared out at the dark garden. I began to think about the world we live in today. We live in a world of contracts, don't we? Everything is an exchange. I give you this, so that you will give me that. A contract is a legal agreement between two people to exchange services or goods. It is built on a foundation of if. If you do your part, then I will do mine. But the moment you fail, the moment it becomes inconvenient, the contract is void. The agreement is broken. I realized that Brandon was a product of this contract mentality. In his mind, people were only valuable as long as they were useful. Promises were only kept as long as they were profitable. It is a cold, lonely way to live, but it is how so many people operate today. Think about it. We see it in our neighborhoods. We see it in our businesses. We even see it in our modern marriages. People enter into agreements with one hand on the pen and the other hand on the door handle, ready to leave the moment things get difficult. In a contract, you protect yourself. You keep your resources to yourself. You watch the other person like a hawk, waiting for them to slip up so you can claim your rights. There is no unity in a contract. Just two people are trying to get the best deal for themselves. I looked back at my life, and I thought about the times I had treated my relationship with God like a contract. I realized that many of us do this. We think, if I am good today, then God will bless me. If I pray enough, then He will help me. We are constantly trying to perform, trying to be good enough to keep the contract valid. But what happens when we fail? What happens when we have a bad day or a bad year? If our life is just a contract with the Almighty, then we are in a lot of trouble, because a contract can be cancelled. A contract can be torn up. Brandon's words in that hallway were a wake-up call for me. They showed me the ugliness of a life based on conditions. He was willing to keep his word only as long as it was convenient for him. He was willing to be a husband only as long as the $72 million made it worth his while. I realized that the world's way of making promises is broken. It is fragile. It is based on performance, and it offers no real security. I didn't want a contract for my daughter. I wanted something much, much deeper. I wanted a bond that could not be broken by a bad mood or a bad economy. That is when I began to dive into the good book. I began to search for a different kind of promise. I wanted to understand why God doesn't use the word contract when he talks to us. I wanted to know the power of the word. Covenant. I spent hours that night, reading and reflecting. I realized that the reason we feel so insecure in this world, the reason we feel like we are always one mistake away from losing everything, is because we are living in a contract world. We have forgotten the ancient, blood-sworn strength of a covenant. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. I sat in my study that evening, surrounded by the quiet hum of the house. The incident at Mr. Sterling's office was still heavy on my mind. I kept thinking about that word Brandon used. Contract. It felt so thin. It felt so hollow. I reached for my old Bible, the one with the worn leather cover that has seen me through many storms. I began to look for a different word, a word that carries more weight than any legal document ever could. That word is covenant. Now, to many of us today, covenant sounds like an old-fashioned word. We might see it in a property deed or a dusty history book. But, in the eyes of the Almighty, a covenant is the most powerful legal and spiritual bond in existence. It is not just a promise, it is a guarantee that heaven is obligated to respond to earth. I want you to really listen to this, because it changed the way I see my life and my daughter's future. There is a massive difference between a contract and a covenant. A contract is an agreement to exchange. You do this, and I will do that. It is built on suspicion and protection, but a covenant is a permanent union. It is where two separate people become one single entity. In a contract, we keep our things separate. We have mine, and we have yours. But in a covenant, everything I have belongs to you, and everything you have belongs to me. Think about that for a moment. If I enter into a covenant with you, my $72 million becomes your $72 million. My strength becomes your strength. But here is the part that many people miss. It goes the other way too. Your debts, they become my debts. Your weaknesses, they become my weaknesses. Your problems, they are now my problems. There is no halfway in a covenant. There is no, if things don't work out, in a covenant. There is no exit strategy. There is no back door. It is a total, complete merging of lives. Brandon didn't want a covenant with my daughter. He wanted a contract. He wanted to keep his heart to himself while he reached for her inheritance. He wanted to be able to walk away if the deal no longer favored him. But a covenant doesn't have an expiration date. It is a bond that is meant to last as long as the parties are alive. I realized that this is how God loves us. He didn't sign a contract with us. He didn't say, Arthur, if you are perfect today, I will be your God. No, he stepped into a covenant. He said, I am yours, and you are mine. Your sins, I will take them. My righteousness, I will give it to you. It is a beautiful, terrifying, and overwhelming reality. In a world that is obsessed with what's in it for me, a covenant asks, how can I give everything to you? It is the anchor of the soul. It is the only thing that can truly hold a family, or a life, together when the storms start to howl. To truly understand why a covenant is so powerful, we have to go back. We have to look at how they were made in the ancient world. It wasn't done with a fancy pen or a notary public. It was done with something much more serious. It was done with blood. In ancient times, when two people wanted to make a covenant, they didn't just shake hands, they would take animals, sacrifice them, and lay the pieces in 2 rows on the ground. Then, the two people would walk together between those pieces of sacrificed animals. It sounds graphic to our modern ears, doesn't it? But it carried a message that no one could ever forget. By walking through those pieces, they were saying, if I ever break my word, if I ever betray this bond, let what happened to these animals happen to me. This was a blood-sworn alliance. It was a way of saying that my life is now tied to this promise. It is the highest form of legal commitment. When you cut a covenant, you are signing your name in the most permanent way possible. The Bible tells us that this is exactly what happened when God made a promise to Abraham. But there was a twist. A very important twist that we need to understand. God told Abraham to prepare the animals. Abraham did as he was told. He waited, and he waited. But when it came time to walk between the pieces, God did something unexpected. He put Abraham into a deep sleep. Abraham couldn't move. He couldn't participate. And then, in the darkness, Abraham saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch pass between the pieces alone. That was God. God was walking through the pieces by himself. Do you see the power in that? God was saying, Abraham, I am taking full responsibility for this agreement. I am the one who will keep this word. Even if you fail, even if you stumble, even if you are not strong enough to keep your end, I will remain faithful. I am staking my own life and my own character on this promise. This is the spiritual authority that backstops our lives. It is not a favors system where we have to beg for help. It is a legal standing. When we are in a covenant with the Almighty, we have a right to be heard in the courts of heaven, not because we are so good, but because the covenant was cut by a God who cannot lie. I thought about Brandon again. He wouldn't have lasted a second in an ancient covenant. He was too focused on his own safety. But a covenant demands that you lay down your life for the other. It is serious, it is heavy, and it is the most secure place a human being can ever be. When you understand that you are in a blood-sworn alliance with the creator of the universe, your fear starts to melt away. You stop living like a beggar, wondering if you will have enough. You start living like a partner. You realize that the signature on your life is not written in ink. It is written in the blood of the everlasting covenant. And that signature, my friends, is final. I sat in my favorite armchair that night, just listening to the old grandfather clock tick in the hallway. It was a rhythmic, steady sound. It reminded me that time moves on, regardless of our mistakes or our heartbreaks. I kept thinking about that $72 million estate and how close I came to making a decision based on a lie. But then, I went back to the story of Abraham. It is a story that has been told for thousands of years, but I think we often miss the most important part. You see, when God asked Abraham to cut those animals and prepare the covenant path, Abraham was ready to do his part. He was ready to walk through the blood and the sacrifice. He was ready to prove his worth. But then, something strange happened. The sun began to set, and a deep sleep fell upon Abraham. It wasn't just a nap. The good book says it was a thick, terrifying darkness that came over him. Abraham was completely paralyzed. He was a spectator in his own life. Why did God do that? Why would the creator of the universe put the man he was making a deal with into a deep sleep? As I sat there in the dark, it finally hit me. God did it because he knew Abraham. He knew that if Abraham walked through those pieces, and if the covenant depended on Abraham's ability to keep his word, the covenant would eventually fail. Because we are human. We get tired. We get scared. We get greedy. Just like Brandon. We change our minds when things get difficult, God was saying. Abraham, I am not going to let this bond depend on you. I am going to let it depend on me. In the darkness, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between those pieces. That was God himself, walking the path alone. He was taking full responsibility, he was saying. I will be faithful when you are faithless. I will be strong when you are weak. If this covenant is broken, I will be the one to pay the price, even though it was your fault. This is the turning point for so many of us, especially as we get older and look back on our regrets. We spend so much of our lives carrying around a heavy bag of guilt. We think about the times we weren't the best parents, the times we weren't the best spouses, or the times we let our anger get the best of us. We feel like we have messed up our contract with God. But, my friends, the covenant is one-sided in its faithfulness. Your security in life is not based on how well you held on to God today. It is based on how well He is holding on to you. You can rest. You can breathe. You can let go of that shame. When I realized this, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that was heavier than any $72 million house. I realized that my daughter's future and my own soul were not balanced on a thin wire of my own performance. They were anchored in the character of a God who walks through the fire when we are too tired to move. We don't have to be perfect to be loved. We just have to be present. We have to accept that the work has already been done. The signature is already on the page, and that signature was written while we were still asleep, while we were still unable to help ourselves. That is the true beauty of a covenant. The next morning, I felt like a different man. I looked at Sarah as she sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee and looking confused about why the house deal had stopped. She looked so small, so vulnerable. It made me realize how we often view ourselves when we talk to our Heavenly Father. Most of us. We live like beggars. We walk into the presence of the Almighty with our heads down, hoping for a few crumbs of mercy. We say, Lord, if you could just help me with this one bill, if you could just give me a little bit of peace, I would be so grateful. We act like we are strangers asking for a favor. But that is not what a covenant partner does. In a covenant, your identity changes completely. You take on the name, the reputation, and the standing of your partner. When I married Martha, she didn't just stay who she was. She became a part of me. My bank account became hers. My home became hers. My protection became her right. In the same way, when you enter into a covenant with God through Jesus, you are no longer a sinner trying to get some attention. You are a covenant partner with the Creator of everything. I want you to think about that phrase, covenant partner. It sounds like something from a high-level law firm, doesn't it? And in a way, it is. You have a legal right to be heard in the courts of heaven. When you feel a lack, you don't have to beg. You remind your partner that he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. When you feel sick or tired, you don't have to plead like a servant. You remind the covenant that by his stripes, you were healed. These are not favors you are asking for. These are rights that have been bought and paid for by your representative, Jesus. I think about Brandon again. He thought he was going to get something from Sarah. He thought he was going to win a contract. But Sarah didn't need to give him anything, because in a true marriage, everything she had already belonged to him. If only he had approached it with the heart of a partner, instead of the heart of a thief. Don't live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. Don't live like you are one mistake away from being kicked out of the family. You are not a guest in the house of God. You are an heir. When the world tells you that you are not enough, or when your past tries to whisper that you are a failure, you need to stand up and speak to those thoughts. You tell them, I am in a blood-sworn alliance with the Almighty God. My identity is tied to His. My future is secured by His word. I am not an outsider looking in. I am a partner, and my partner never loses. Stop living like a beggar. Start living like the partner you were meant to be. The $72 million I wanted to give Sarah was just a shadow of the inheritance that is already yours. It is time to walk into that inheritance with your head held high. I was sitting out on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. It was so peaceful. But my mind kept going back to that day at the office. I kept thinking about how fragile that $72 million deal was. If I had signed it, Brandon would have had a legal claim. If I didn't, he had nothing. It all depended on a signature. It all depended on my being happy with him in that moment. But as I began to study the covenant of God, I realized something that changed my entire prayer life. My security, and your security. It does not depend on how well we perform today. Let that sink in for a moment. It does not depend on you. Many of us spend our whole lives on a spiritual treadmill. We think, if I read my Bible for 30 minutes, God will smile at me. If I don't lose my temper in traffic, God will protect my family. We treat God like a cosmic manager who is constantly reviewing our contract. We are always afraid that one bad day, one moment of weakness, will cause him to tear up the agreement and walk away. But a covenant is not based on your performance. It is based on the character of the one who made the promise. The good book tells us that God is a covenant-keeping God. It says that He can't lie. Think about that. Impossible. It is not just that He chooses not to lie. It is that His very nature cannot produce a falsehood. If He said He will never leave you, then He is legally and spiritually bound to stay, even when you feel like you have wandered far away. I looked at the old oak trees in my yard. They don't have to try to be trees. They just are. They are rooted deep in the earth. And that is how we are in the covenant. We are rooted in the blood of the everlasting covenant. That blood, the blood shed on the cross, is like a celestial signature that never fades. It is a seal that cannot be broken. In the ancient world, once a blood covenant was cut, it was final. You couldn't just change your mind because the other person was having a bad week. You were in it until the end. So, when the enemy of your soul whispers that you aren't good enough, or when your own heart condemns you for a mistake you made 40 years ago, you need to remind yourself of the character of your partner. Your safety is not based on your prayer life. It is not based on your perfect record. It is based on the fact that God cannot deny Himself. He made a promise to Jesus on your behalf, and He will keep that promise because His reputation is on the line. You can sleep soundly tonight, my friends. Not because you were perfect today, but because the one who watches over you never slumbers and never fails. You are secure. You are protected. And that protection is as solid as the throne of heaven itself. I remember looking at Sarah a few days after the incident. I still had the $72 million estate in my name. And I realized Sarah didn't have to do anything to earn that house. She didn't have to work for 40 years as I did. She didn't have to build the business. All she had to do was be my daughter. The house was hers by right of her relationship to me. It was an inheritance. This is the hardest part for us to grasp as Americans. We are taught from a young age that there is no such thing as a free lunch. We are told that you have to work for everything you get. We take that work ethic and we try to apply it to God. We think that peace and healing and provision are favors that we have to beg for. We act like we are standing outside a locked gate, crying out for God to notice us. And maybe, just maybe, throw us a bone. But in a covenant, the resources of the stronger partner are fully available to the weaker partner. Listen closely. Because of what Jesus did, you have a legal claim to the peace of God. You have a legal claim to the healing of God. You have a legal claim to the provision of God. These are not things you are trying to get God to do. These are things He has already done. The price has already been paid. The $72 million debt of your soul was settled at Calvary. So, how do we see these things in our lives? It isn't through more effort. It is through faith. Think about a trust fund. If a grandfather leaves $1 million in a trust for his grandson, that boy doesn't have to beg the bank for the money. He just has to show up with his identification and sign the papers. He is simply claiming what is already his. Faith is the signature on the inheritance papers. When you are facing a storm, or when your body is tired, or when you don't know how the bills will be paid, don't go to God as a beggar. Go to Him as a covenant partner. Remind Him of what the representative, Jesus, already bought for you. Say, Father, I thank you that my peace was bought with a price. I thank you that my needs are covered by your riches in glory. You aren't trying to twist His arm. You are simply agreeing with the covenant. You are stepping into your identity as an heir. Stop trying to earn a gift. You cannot work for an inheritance. You can only receive it. The heavy lifting has been done. The blood has been shed. The contract of the world has been replaced by the covenant of the King. It is time to start living like the child of a king. It is time to walk into the mansion of His grace and realize that this is where you belong. I have spent a lot of time thinking about that day at the lawyer's office, and I have spent even more time thinking about Brandon. You see, it would be easy for me to just sit here and judge him. It would be easy to say that he was the only one with a cold, calculating heart. But as I look back on my own life, and as I talk to folks in our community, I realize that many of us are living our lives with that very same contract mentality. We might not be trying to steal a $72 million estate, but we are treating our relationship with the Almighty like a business deal. Think about how we wake up in the morning. We check our internal scoreboard. We think, did I lose my temper yesterday? Did I forget to help my neighbor? Did I have a selfish thought? And if the score looks bad, we pull away from God. We act like Brandon, thinking that because we didn't perform well, the deal is off. We are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. We think, well, I messed up, so now I should expect something bad to happen. I should expect to lose my peace. I should expect to lose my provision. This, my friends, is the contract mentality. It is a life of fear. It is a life of walking on eggshells, and it is the main reason why so many of us do not see the full blessings of the covenant in our daily lives. A contract says, I will love you as long as you are perfect, but a covenant says, I have already decided to love you, so you can stop trying to be perfect. I had to tell Sarah this. After I tore up those papers, we sat down in the living room. I told her, Sarah, I didn't stop the gift because I stopped loving you. I stopped it because I wanted to protect you from a contract. I want your life to be built on a covenant. And that is what I want for you today. I want you to shift your mind from being a hired hand to being a partner. A partner doesn't run away when there is a problem. A partner leans into the relationship. When you make a mistake, you don't have to hide in the bushes. Like Adam in the garden, you can walk straight to the throne of grace. You don't go there to beg for a new contract. You go there to remind your partner of the covenant that was already signed in blood. The Bible calls the covenant the anchor of the soul. I want you to imagine a great ship in the middle of a massive, dark storm on the Atlantic. The winds are screaming. The waves are 50 feet high. The ship is being tossed around like a toy. It looks like everything is about to fall apart. But deep beneath the surface, there is an anchor. It is hooked into the solid rock of the ocean floor. The ship might move. The people on board might be scared. The sails might even tear. But as long as that anchor holds, the ship is not going anywhere. The covenant is that anchor. When the doctor gives you a report you didn't want to hear, the storm is screaming. But the anchor holds. When the economy shifts and your retirement account looks a bit smaller, the waves are crashing. but the anchor holds. When you feel lonely, or when you feel like the world has moved on without you, the wind is howling, but the anchor holds. Your security is not based on the weather, it is based on the anchor. And that anchor is the blood-sworn promise of a God who cannot fail. So, I am asking you today, stop living like a beggar. Stop living like you are one mistake away from being cancelled. You are not a contract worker. You are a covenant partner. When the enemy of your soul tries to bring up your past, you point him to the covenant. When you feel a sense of lack, you remind yourself of the resources of your partner. The $72 million house in Greenwich was just a piece of property. It could burn down. It could be sold. But the inheritance you have in the covenant, it is eternal. It is fadeless. And it is yours right now. Change the way you talk to yourself. Change the way you pray. Stop saying, Lord, if you are willing, please help me. Start saying, Father, I thank you for our covenant. I thank you that your strength is mine. I thank you that your peace is mine. Live your life with your head held high, not because of what you have done, but because of what He has done. The signature on your life is final. The deal is closed. You are safe. You are loved. And you are never, ever alone. As I sit here in my study, looking at the empty spot on my desk where those $72 million papers once lay, I feel a sense of peace that I cannot fully describe. My daughter, Sarah, she is doing well. She eventually realized that the house was just a building. But the truth we discovered together was a foundation that will last forever. I want to leave you with one final thought today. We live in a world that is obsessed with fine print and exit clauses. We are so used to being let down by people who don't keep their word. But you do not have to live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop. Your standing with the Almighty is not a temporary deal. It is not a contract that can be cancelled by a bad day or a moment of weakness. The signature on your life was not written with a fountain pen in a lawyer's office in Greenwich. It was written in the blood of Jesus, on a hill called Calvary. And that signature, my friends, is final. You are not a beggar. You are not an outsider. You are a covenant partner with the Creator of the universe. When you go to sleep tonight, let that truth be your pillow. When you wake up tomorrow, let that truth be your strength. If this message has helped you understand your legal and spiritual security in God's love, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. It helps us reach more people who are feeling lost and insecure in this current world. And do not forget to share this with someone you love. Maybe you have a friend, a neighbor, or a family member who feels like they have messed up too many times to be loved by God. Send this to them. Let them know that they are secure in a bond that can never be broken. Before you go, I would love to hear from you. In the comments section, just type the word secure. It is a small way for us to stand together and declare that we trust in the character of our covenant-keeping God. Thank you for spending this time with me. It has been an honor to share my heart with you. I am Arthur, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video. May the peace of the covenant be with you today and every day. God bless you, and God bless America.